Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. As always, before we get started, what's been happening in the last week? Well, the 100% drop rate for the Halloween event has definitely been pretty interesting so far. I saw a tweet from CCP Rise, I believe, who indicated that destruction of ships in the game went up by about 30% in all spaces. Or at least nullsec, lowsec and highsec. I think highsec the highest with like 30%, and I myself have also been keeping an eye on Jita, and quite a bit of criminal activity there, so I took the opportunity to grab a couple of extra kill marks for my Dominics. And next to that, you do notice when you go to and from Jita that there's lots of activities on the gate, and that lots of people are keeping an eye on valuable cargo holds so that they can try and grab all of it, because all of it is going to drop once you see that it's there. So pretty interesting metric. I would say this change for me personally falls a little bit within the Chaos era aspect of EVE Online, because this is a little bit unexpected, definitely has a pretty big impact on the game. So far very positive, of course, that we have all of this extra destruction, but is this what we want for newer players? Of course, an increase of suicide ganking, probably in highsec by about 30%. Well, it's not only suicide ganking, I think quite often we're actually also going after all of those suspect flags and things like that. So yeah, it is more activity, but for newer players it is going to be very harsh, of course. So that's what's been happening there. Of course, next to that, the skilling spree is still going on. So right now I think it's absolutely worth it to at least log in, get the number of NPC kills that you need for the skill points, and that you of course then also grab the daily login rewards for the Halloween event. Lots of cool skins. I think they're over, so that's what we did last week, but lots of cool skins, doubles I think for the pumpkin skins, but the final batch were headhunter skins, and those were actually a couple of them were new for me. So maybe we'll take a quick look at that as well in the New Eden store, of course, when we're talking about skins. So the headhunter skins are pretty hot, and yeah, as I've said, the final reward was a batch of them, so that was pretty nice. And then we have these Malagreen Marshlight skins. I'm gonna call them the pumpkin skins, and these look pretty cool, but apparently the ones that we received, to me at least, were already known, so they must have been rewards in a previous event before. And the ones that are new in the store are actually for new ships that receive them. And here again, I'm gonna say it again, the Crewer, the Ashimu, these look amazingly cool in this Marshlight skin, in this pumpkin skin. And so if I'm not mistaken, the Titan, it's marked as new, but I got the Avatar one and it was already learned, so I'm not sure exactly what's happening there. But yeah, with Halloween we've got the Marshlight skin, we've got the headhunter skins, and those look pretty damn cool. And then you can put them on a ship of your liking, like maybe a Talos, to go hunt for all of that loot, for instance. That could be pretty cool. Is there one for the Minmatar one? Not seeing it in here at least, but alright, the Talos is definitely something that you can use for a gag if you want to as well. Next up, we'll see. I myself have not moved any of my loot to Jita, and let's see if I'm the only one, and if enough people are like risk averse enough to not transport goods. Will this have an impact on the market? Let's get started with some plex and stuff that's coming in at 4 minutes. 400 like that, and we will of course start with plex, which in Jita, well, 3.7 million for most of them. Last week it was a little bit above that, so this would indicate like a downward trend. But if we go to the Jita station, or outside of the Jita station, we're climbing to almost 3.6 million for the sellers, and the buyers are still below 3.5 million. But look at the chart, it starts to look interesting. The 5-day moving average is definitely creating an upward trend here, and has now broken through the 3.5 million. So it's really these sellers in the player owned trade hubs around Jita, mostly perimeter, that are pushing the price up for plex. That is very interesting. That would mean that these two, a double dip right here in August and in September, could have been the bottoms, the time to buy. And I think during Eve Talk, when these were happening, I also called these the buy opportunities for your plex investments for the year. This is a natural trend. August, September, on top of that we had lower activity due to the blackout, so this was a little bit of a double whammy. But now October, November, the winter months tend to be high activity months in EVE Online, at least winter for the northern hemisphere it is, I think. And as a result, this upward trend to me is in line with my own expectations for plex. We'll see. It's maybe like a little bit slower than what I would have hoped for if, for instance, we had a big announcement at Vegas or something like that for a named expansion or something. But there is still the second chapter in the invasion that is coming, and I personally am a little bit excited about that. And I think this is an indication that more people are coming back to the game, and prices of plex are starting to go back up. Let's hope that you made your investments at the right time. For the multiple pilot train certificate, well, it's not very visible, but if we look at it in a little bit more detail, slight hesitation at the tail end, but same thing here in the last 3-4 weeks or so. We do have some steps, or some attempts at least, to bring the price up a little bit. Currently 1.5 billion for the sellers, and the buyers are at 143 billion. So is this up a little bit from last week? I think it is. Here it's not super visible, but I am seeing first signs that the prices are starting to go back up. Then of course we still have the skill extractors, which ought to mirror the plex price very closely. That's a little bit different. 5-day moving average went above 400 million last week and is now just trying to stay there. 401 million for the sellers, and the buyers are coming in at 396. That's a super narrow margin, so there is a little bit of hesitation here. 396 and down to 360 in the station. That's okay, very interesting. And then we've got actually 401 in the perimeter tranquility trade tower and 412 in JITA. So this is a large margin. 50 million in margin on a 360 buy is actually decently large between sellers and buyers in JITA 4.4. But look at where the action is. This is in the perimeter trade tower. That's where the price is set. 401 for the sellers, 396 for the buyers. That's just a 5-6 million 5 million ISK margin, 5.5 basically, which is very small, and about 10% of the margin in JITA 4.4. So this is definitely a trade that is now being dominated, and at least the price setting is happening in the player-owned trade hubs, and there's a bit of hesitation at the tail end, but it already broke through that 400 million mark, and sellers are staying above that, at least for now. Next, the upcoming weeks I think are going to be very interesting for this category. Especially if the Talos team does manage to come out with bi-weekly updates. We'll see. It could be interesting. Next up we have our injectors, so let's start with the large scale injectors actually, as always. Ooh, and these are going back down in price. Well, there is of course a logical explanation for that. The skilling spree is still happening. CCP is coming out with lots of login bonuses now. We still have the holidays to come, basically Christmas, and the new year, that tends to be filled with gifts, and at the moment it is undeniable that CCP is trying to entice players to log into the game, to come back to the game, and to actually play the game by just giving out lots of skill points. I once made a video about new player experience and the image that EVE Online does have, that it's just too late to get started because you'll never catch up to anyone. And anything structural that CCP tries to do, and even this now with these skill points, but anything structurally that CCP tries to do tends to just backfire because of the veteran player base always being able to take more advantage of new advantages that CCP would try to give to new players. But stuff like this of course just raises everyone's SP that's active, and so for new players that start the game now, I think this is very nice, and it's something that we'll have to live with. I think if we want fresh blood in the game to stick around, we'll have to give them lots of goodies. We'll have to put them on a fast track for things that we have that has taken years for us to actually build up, and the skill points is a big part of that. So actually dropping to not yet a 1-year low, but dropping definitely through the 800 million ISK barrier here for the large skill injectors. I'm seeing this as a pressure from the skilling spree. 795 for the sellers, 770 for the buyers, and here that whole talk about what I'm seeing as part of both CCP's current tactic to get people to log in the game, to try the game, and to stick around in the game, is to give lots of SP. That is going to put lots of pressure on the large skill injectors. So this is very interesting for an investment, but I think that you need to time with maybe like the end of the holidays, where it's less likely for CCP to continue with skilling spree, to continue with daily login rewards. So here I would be very patient, and especially as long as the drop here continues, I think we can still go lower the more CCP comes out with these types of actions for the game. So be very careful before investing in the large skill injectors, but they're clearly starting to form a late opportunity, whereas we know that the plex, if these continue to go up, that part of the skill injector markets should put upper pressure as well. So as long as this keeps going down, it is really CCP's intervention in the game that's driving these prices down, and that is potentially, of course, creating an opportunity when these come to a halt for a sustained period of time, which could happen, in my opinion. If I had to guess now, it would be like next year. So try to buy as close as possible to the end of the holidays. I think there we'll see max pressure showing up through the price, and after that I think we have that upwards potential, but it could be that CCP decides that daily login rewards are just becoming a part of EVE Online as well, and then of course skill injectors could continually be under pressure. Small skill injectors, same thing, definitely dropping off as well, heading for 160 million. It's 163 for the sellers and 154 for one buyer, then it's down to 152.6. So you can see the buyers are already trying to drive the price back down, and supply just keeps adding up here, whereas demand for actually using up skill points is probably pretty low, or lower than normal because of the skilling spree, for instance. And then we have the daily alpha injectors that are dropping off to another low point. This is actually pretty much a 1-year low point. Very interesting and surprising as well. 41 million for the sellers, 34 million pretty much for the buyers. That is pretty damn low. Another volume spike. This is obviously another sale from CCP somewhere. Can't really tell you where it is. But we know that CCP is very heavily investing in a new player experience, trying to get fresh blood in the game and trying to keep fresh blood in the game. So sales for the daily alpha injectors do make a lot of sense. And here is where the actual give the new players a leg up comes in, right? Large skill injectors, small skill injectors, of course, they have diminishing returns and things like that. But daily alpha injectors are pretty much for new characters, and a lot of these ought to be new players, although alts of course can take advantage of the daily alpha injector market as well, but then you can't really use two alphas at the same time. So yeah, I think that this is the right way to go. Don't put too many sales in the extractor market itself. This is also for the veteran players to bounce characters around for different tasks. The daily alpha injector is where you do give newer players a leg up, and so this one is being heavily discounted in the last month. I think this is going to be the second or even the third discount that we're seeing here for these daily alpha injectors. 1-year low point, longer term of course, if you can grab some of these for less than 35 million ISK, look at the upwards potential, 70 million, double the price. That is something to keep in mind as well, but just the holidays are still coming, so don't dive into this too soon, I think. But there's definitely opportunity here. Daily alpha injectors, large scale injectors, small scale injectors, they follow suit a little bit more as well. I'm seeing some investment opportunities there for sure. Next up, the mineral market coming in at 14.5. Like that. As always, we'll start with Tritanium, which knew a very big dive down straight to 5 ISK and is now basically bouncing on that price. Volumes are back down substantially as well, so that must have been lots of dumping and selling, perhaps. there is one possible explanation that might end up driving the price back up to like 5.5, maybe even probably 5.5 isk. It would be if this is just massive supply that's coming in before the announced 100% loot drop week. So that could make sense. I don't think it was announced on October 1st yet, so it doesn't make that much sense. But perhaps the reason why we're stalling is, of course, because new supplies might be drying up very quickly. But it's a noticeable volume spike that has driven the price down to 5. So now we have the bounce. 511, let's go like that. 511 for most sellers. 501, yeah, buyers forced up above 5 isk. That's pretty interesting for at least the first one. And then last 24 hours, now it's still half a page, still a billion units here, a couple 100 million units here. It's not that much. It's definitely not that big in volumes, but it's still I think pretty much okay to supply the market. So it's not like we're drying up of titanium because of the well, let's call it the Halloween gank week that's happening right now. Pyrite also a little bit of a bounce up though after going below 4.5 isks. Slight volume spike but nothing too noticeable. Is back up, 481 for the sellers, 438 for the buyers. So basically a little bit of lack of sellers. This is a bit of an opening up of a margin between sellers and buyers on the upswing. So this might actually be less supply. Last 24 hours, look at that. Really not a lot being brought in here in Jita. Yeah, it might actually be bigger than I thought, just looking at the titanium market. That one might just have a bit more inertia as well after that massive dump here. So some traders might just be ready to sell this stuff and not necessarily import it. Let's take a look at Mixelon then. Also, definitely a jump back from a 1-year low point, must be said, of 38 below 40 ISK is quite a loss. But we're up to 43 ISK for the sellers and 41.35 for the buyers as well. If you look at the last 24 hours, well, these are brought in. And then this one down here, who's trying to sell 50 million units at 44 ISK. He's gonna have patience, apparently, but it's not that much in the fresh supply or the fresh sell orders. So that is interesting. Let's see if this trend continues in the upcoming weeks. Otherwise, this might just be a blip because, of course, of this special week. We get Isogen, went to 1-year low point as well. Oof, that's really bad, below 13 ISK. He's now recovering from that a little bit. 1370 for the sellers, 1311 for the buyers. That is still very, very cheap, of course, below pretty much the entire chart. So Isogen bouncing back, but from a really low point. So there's not that much to say here. Not even on volumes. So basically lots of dumping on the increased volumes, and now, well, everything is just drying up and the price is slightly recovering because of that. Then we've got Noxium, same thing, right? Landed at 225, bounced up just a little bit. 260 for the sellers. Yeah, okay, definitely again opening up that margin. Only 3 fresh sell orders, which is probably someone trying to take advantage of the higher price that's available all of a sudden on a lack of fresh sell orders. Buyers are at 221. They're just pretty much not moving. Couple of sell orders, but very close to one another when it comes to the price setting there. And are we seeing some, big volume to dump the price just before, like here in October? I'm not. Well, this is a big volume, but that's actually an uptick. So nope. No, it's not that. Okay, interesting. So it might just be that the current event is drying supplies up here. After that, we still have Zydrine to take a look at, also going back to 500 ISK. Pretty nice performance here, with a bit of a volume increase driving the price to a low point, almost 400 ISK on a couple of days. 504 for the sellers, 460 for the buyers. Pretty impressive recovery for Zydrine to get back to its average 500 ISK, to be honest. And then we've got Megasite that is unfortunately doing the opposite. So it is not a uniform story here. Megasite continuing to be under pressure, back to a 1-year low point pretty much. We're talking 374 for the sellers. That's opened up a little bit, but 338 for the buyers. And in between there, the average price, so both sellers and buyers are getting sales done basically in the Megasite market, unfortunately continuing to drive the price back down. And then finally we have Morphite that is able to to hold on very well to a price well above 10,000 disc, which is not bad. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. Still a massive premium because it is tied to the Tech2 economy apparently. Very nice to see the more fight performance. That was an amazing trade to have made, of course, here from May to the peak in September. The mineral market, all right. Lots of bumps up after reaching low points and pretty low sell volumes at the moment. Interesting stuff, but I personally do need to see more evolution before I decide whether this is a trend or whether this is just this week's event showing up in the market. PI might help us here a little bit if we see lots of recoveries on low sales and low new sell orders. This might just be happening. So let's take a look at that. PI coming in at 20.05. So let's go. As always, we'll start with the broadcast notes, and that's the exact opposite of what I would have expected, at least. I mean, we could have gone down a little bit from the 225 range here on these daily averages, but at least 2 million should have been defendable. And we're talking about 2.1 million for the sellers, but less than 2 million for the buyers. And apparently the average price in the last couple of days quite often went below that 2 million mark. So that's just dumping straight to those buyers. Fresh supply last 24 hours. Look at that. All of this still coming in here. So that is quite a lot actually. That doesn't indicate a complete dry up of supply and of trade basically across the game here. Construction blocks pretty much flat for the week. That's pretty interesting. We're talking less than 10,000 discs for the sellers, so still definitely trading below average, and 9,200 for the buyers. And let's hope that that's 1 hour away. In 1 hour, okay, yeah, because it is now winter time here in Europe, so I gotta be a little careful about that. But we still have an hour, so that should be absolutely fine. And construction blocks flat, fresh supplies the last 24 hours, not that much, but that's kind of normal for something that is well below its average at the moment. Then we've got consumer electronics. These are also obviously trading below average at the moment and basically flat in the last couple of days as well. 12,200, a bit below average, not that much. Supplies here, third of a page. Not that bad, but pretty normal for this low price. And then buyers are 1,000 discs below that. This feels pretty regular, to be honest. Coolants was doing well, gives back a little bit of ground, but I think holding on to 13,000 discs. Yep, 13,200 for the sellers, 11,100 for the buyers. Fresh supply though, more than half a page in the last 24 hours. So this feels actually pretty normal, which does make me doubt the story in the minerals, but we'll see how it all works out. So coolants going back down a bit, but coming from a decently nice high point, of course, and still trading well above average. Enriched uranium is continuing a slow decline, but basically as long as sellers are above 14,000 discs, and they are 14,400, we're still trading right around the average. Supplies here, nothing too special, right? This is decent in the last 24 hours, and buyers a bit above 1,000 discs below that. That's also basically the normal margin for these refined PI materials. Integrity response drones, slight move up in the 5-day moving average, but we're definitely still struggling to get back to an average price. A bit above 2.3 million for the sellers and a bit below that for the buyers. Yeah, the market agrees on its current price for integrity response drones. The mechanical parts was struggling a little bit in September and October, going to less than 10,000 discs, which I think on some occasions I must have said, yeah, that looks like a buy opportunity. I have never taken advantage of that because I actually make mechanical parts. My reflex here is just to start stockpiling it, to not sell it. And look at that, a bit of patience does pay off. We're talking 11,500 for the sellers, which is back to a very reasonable average price. We're still seeing okay supplies, 89, 88 days, 84 days here. So that still feels decently okay. And then the 1,000 disc margin, actually a little bit less than that. Buyers at 10,600. That is basically pretty normal on this recovery of the price back to a normal range. Nuclear reactors next. Yeah, that is the one market that would need to see volumes increase to basically see a bit of a PI hype for some reason. That is not happening, and so we are going from high points of 115,000 disk down to like 80,000 disk, which might seem great, but these volumes mean that you're just not gonna make good trades on this. Basically, no one wants to buy nuclear reactors anymore. 77,000 for the buyers, and the sellers, they're just dumping what they have or what they make at the price so that at least they get something out of the PI activity of the nuclear reactors. That market is completely drying up. Now, it must be said though, buying for this price, and that's not even a lot, buying for less than 80,000 disk on this chart is very, very cheap. So maybe for a very long-term investment, nuclear reactors might be interesting at this point, but the volumes are just terrible at the moment. It's a completely destroyed market for some reason. Organic mortar applicators, what about these? Well, staying below average, right? 1.1 million would be the average. Buyers are just above 1 million. Sellers, excuse me, just above 1 million. Buyers just below that. And again, the market agrees for advanced PI materials. Less than average price, very low margin, volumes a little bit low as well. But across the board here, not a lot of to expect until CCP would decide to announce something like a structure, something like that, which I don't see happening before FanFest anymore. Robotics, like mechanical parts, had a little bit of a tough time here in September, October, went down to 90,000 disk, is trying to recover. I'd actually say 100,000 disk would be a more normal average. We're talking 98,000 for the sellers. Bit of competition still, but it's slowly getting there, just having a tough time getting back to that 100k. Buyers at 92,600, so that's only, what is it, 6,000, less than that, 5,500 disk. That is definitely percentage-wise a lower margin than the refined materials, which is usually around a little bit below 10%. So here we obviously still have a little bit of upward pressure for the robotics, but will we reach 100k? It would be nice to do so on the average price. Just doesn't seem to be in the books right now. Then we've got the self-harmonizing power core, same. Well, for advanced PI materials, of course, bit of a downtrend at the tail end. 2 million, 2.1 million. This one is around its average, bit below 2.1 for the sellers. But once that happens, sellers are still around their average. Look at the difference with the buyers. Those are well below 2 million at around 1.9 million. And that opens up a margin right away. So here, a bit of a lack of supply, nothing in the last 24 hours has driven the price back to just an average price, and it immediately opens up a margin between sellers and buyers. So that pressure here at the tail end is probably going to continue. Superconductors also staying below average, doing okay, I think, if we're above 11k, 11,700 in fact for most sellers, 10,700, that same 1,000 disk, a little bit less than 10% difference between sellers and buyers is quite normal. So here again, superconductors, well, with mechanical parts, I could consider to bring those to the market now. I also make superconductors. I'm gonna hold on like 12,000 disk or something like that on the sell price, would be my minimum personally, but I'm not investing on this low point because I make this. Then test cultures, all right, a surprisingly strong performance, trying to really crawl back here, getting towards 9,000 disks. Is that correct? Well, no, but that's super recent. 8,000 for most sellers, 7,300 for the buyers, but the charts, the average prices are definitely going back up. Is that because of the trade hub? No, not really. Okay, interesting to see these average prices go up that much for test cultures, despite what we're seeing in sellers and buyers. And then with our mainframes, yeah, 2.25 million. Normally we usually get there. Sellers are almost there, but then we've got 2 million ISK for the buyers. So that's 250,000 disk on of difference. That's more than 10%. That's again a decent margin opening up. You can definitely still grab these well below average if you put up a buy order. So PI still struggling, but we're definitely not seeing any signs of like a complete stop of movement of products because of what's happening this week here either. Next up, advanced wood materials coming in at 2840. All right, last week we saw pressure, I think, but most of them being able to hold on quite decently. Well, here crystalline carbonites, pressure again, going to around 140, 145 for the sellers, 139 for the buyers. Yeah, basically back to a less than average price here. Ferrite carbide, same thing, definitely pressure here as well. 140 on the chart, 144 for the sellers, 139.5 for the buyers. Back on the less than average train, unfortunately. Then we have the titanium carbides. That one held on really well to 200 disc. Not to last here, last 10 days. We are back down, 186 for the sellers, 175 for the buyers. And 175 for the buyers. Yeah, basically buyers are a bit below average, sellers are back to the average. And then we've got tungsten carbides also continuing to decline substantially. Look at these data points, less than 170. We're talking 187 for the sellers, but 150 for the buyers. So that is definitely a pretty big margin opening up, showing a complete lack of demand here. Oversupply for these carbide materials, all of them under pressure. And tungsten carbide, yeah, buying for 150, that is well below the entire chart, could almost be seen as an investment opportunity already. But I think this trend, there's no sign of like big conflict or anything like that in Nasdaq at the moment, unfortunately. So I am not seeing any reason to suspect that is going to change anytime soon. Next up, the metamaterials. Here are the photonic metamaterials. Those have been holding on surprisingly well despite the decline in the carbide materials, and still doing so. Photonic metamaterials holding on to 16,000 disc, which is not a great price, but 16.6k for the seller, 16,000 for the first buyer. Most of them 1,000 disc below the sellers. Is actually surprisingly strong performance considering what's happening in the carbide materials. Plasmonic metamaterials, same thing here. Look at that, holding on very well too. Well, look at this chart, average to even slightly above average price on a lack of supply. 21,200 for the sellers, 19,700 for the buyers. That's a great price. I'm really curious to see how long this is going to last. Next up, we have the non-linear metamaterials. This is the first one that is definitely not doing so well. Back to a less than average price by a mile, and sometimes data points at 20,000 disc, which is where the buyers are at pretty much. 22,000 for the sellers. That is back to a below average, and even buying very close to a low point here. And then we've got terahertz metamaterials. Ooh, that is interesting. So that's bad news, I think, for the upcoming weeks for the photonic and the plasmonic, because terahertz is diving off a cliff to a 1-year low point, breaking straight through 20,000 disc. And that is a price we've not seen in the last year. So this is very low, 19,500. Look at the supply compared to the others, 15,750 for the buyers. Yeah. This looks great, of course, and in all likeliness is okay to buy, but this looks very much like a falling knife, and you don't want to be the one catching it, because it might just slice right through your buy orders as well. Be very careful here. This is yeah, definitely a complete trend break from most of the other metamaterials, yes. And yeah, buying now for 15,750. I mean, that is very, very low, but also to me feels pretty risky to try and jump in at this point. But is it an opportunity potentially? Absolutely. This is massive. Next up, we still have our other materials. Here are the fermionic condensates. Went to 1-year low point, bounced off. So if you're seeing that as a possible what might be happening for terahertz metamaterials, then of course it would be a great time to buy. But will it happen? Hard to say. We're definitely stopping at just above 80,000 disc. 81,375 and 81,000 for the buyers. So yeah, bit off of the lows, but still trading very low, well below average. Ferrogel next. Again, 1-year low point and basically a slight bounce, trying to get back to 42,500. Not really succeeding there. Buyers at 39,000. This is pretty much below the chart again. Fullerite, slow pressure continuing to build, where we held on to a price for the sellers very close to 1,000 disc for a long time, but now you can see that that gap is widening. We're slowly heading for 900. It's still 1,000 for the sellers, but 872 for the buyers. And the fact that these average prices continue to go down does mean that we see more and more dumping. How long can the sellers stay above 1,000 disc? Not for very long anymore, I'm afraid. Hypersynaptic fibers, look at that, 1-year low point, clearly a sharp drop off as well. 10,600 for the sellers, 10,000 for the buyers, and look at 10,000 on the chart. Lowest point for a year as well. Nano transistors, complete opposite, 1 year high point and actually climbing to 6,500. A bit of new supply coming in drives the sellers back to 6,400. 6,000 for the buyers, that is still a great price for the nano transistors. The one exception to the rule that has managed to hold on to a very, very good price. Comparing the 1 year chart at least. Phenolic composites, pressure showing up as well, not yet at the 1 year low points. 2,000 for the sellers, 1,750 for the buyers though. That's a pretty decent margin. There's definitely room to go back down here as well. And then we've got ceramic fibers getting to a 1 year low point here as well. 380 for the sellers, 370 for the buyers. That is pretty damn cheap as well. These charts, this one here, and which one was it? This one here, I think. Yeah, these are quite worrying for the advanced move materials. On the other hand, we definitely have stalls here as well, which would mean that these are buy opportunities. It's a gamble. I'll leave it up to you. I personally am not gonna jump in on advanced move materials at this point. It may be a mistake, but it feels very risky because of the situation in Nosek, basically. Next up, which is too stable. We need to see more destruction for me to see hype and to see potentially, I think, an impact on supplies for advanced materials, and even that is not that easy to manage anymore either. All right, Tech 2 ships next, coming in at 35.30. Like that, and let's go take a look at these. As you know, I myself have invested in some stealth bombers at 22 million. Lots of these have been under pressure last week. The logistics cruisers looked very appetizing. Just been super busy at work for me, so I haven't had the time to take advantage of that. But here is the Ares, and that's interesting, right? We can clearly see a little bit of a rise in price in the last couple of days. 28 million now for the sellers, still 23 million for the buyers, so they are still pretty damn cheap, but the sellers are driving the price back up a little bit. Interesting stuff. The Basilisk last week was in a very nice spot and is now even in an even better spot. That's a bit of a surprise, but we're talking 191 million for the sellers, 181 for the buyers. If you can grab one between that, between 180 and 190, well, you're buying well below the entire chart. The Basilisk is in a great place to try and make an investment, in my opinion. Next up, we have the Cerberus, also going back down after a bit of recovery. It's basically back at its 1 year low point, which it has reached 1, 2, 3, at least 3 times, 4 times in fact, in the last year. So this is not completely abnormal, but 229 million for the sellers and 189 for the buyers is a healthy margin. Grabbing a Cerberus for less than 190 million ISK is definitely very, very nice as well. The Crow next, also recovering a little bit. Interesting. Another Interceptor. Oh, of course, Interceptor rebalance. That might be the reason. That was announced at the Vegas, so this one is going back up as well. Sellers are at 33 million, buyers at 27. Yeah, this must be like a bit of fallout. I don't think these guys get rebalanced, but maybe they're basically being dragged up by the other Interceptors as well. This one is... Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. And then let's not click away the wrong window. Excuse me about that. I want to look at the trades, and this one is, yeah, immune to interdiction sphere launchers. So that is not the one that gets rebalanced normally. I think it's combat ones, but maybe they're just dragged up on Interceptor hype here. Guardian, slight bounce off of 200 million. The question is where the buyers at. 183 million, 214 for the buyers. That's a pretty big margin. Again, you could still, I think, try a buy order for a Guardian, a Basilisk, and have a very good purchase right now. Heretic, not much to say for these interdictors. I think I'm really starting to think that we'll need a CCP intervention to bring these back if you want to see higher prices. Maybe they're right where CCP wants them, of course. 68 million for the sellers, 60 million for the buyers. We've been there most of the year. So yeah, again, you can buy interdictors for 60 million. That's the investment you can make. You've been able to make it for most of the year. It's up to you to decide whether or not that is an opportunity for the longer term. The Hound, very flat here, so we're not seeing an immediate recovery, meaning potentially immediate profit for me. I definitely bought at the lowest point here though. We're talking 25 million for the sellers, 22.5 million for the buyers. That's still very close to my purchase. Oh, which is this one actually for the Hound. It only triggered for 1 out of the 5, so these 4 is still mine. It's very unlikely that's gonna trigger, but I'm gonna be patient here. We're gonna leave that up. The Ishtar slightly under pressure, down to less than 250. 250 for the sellers, 234 for the buyers. Average price let's see here, 240. Yeah, so sometimes you can definitely grab an Ishtar for less than 235, I think, considering this average price. Manticore staying well below 30 million is definitely recovered away from the 22 million though. 26 million for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers, and now it is flat, so it's still a very difficult time for the Tech 2 ships. Munin, same thing, obviously trading below average. 228 for the sellers, 213 for the buyers of the Munin. That's actually a pretty damn good price as well. 213 definitely at the lower end of all of these charts. Then we've got the Nemesis, slight recovery towards 25 million as well. 25.4 for the sellers, 22.6 for the buyers, though buyers very patient. And yeah, someone tried to point one me, but I got my 5 Nemesis there. I got my 100 million ISK investment, and I'm hoping for 30 to 35 million on the sell price. That would be great. Definitely gonna keep an eye on that. The Oneros is staying below 200 million as well. 203 for the sellers, 166 for the buyers. That is starting to be crazy low as well. Look at that. Definitely playing with these super low points here as well. But keep the volumes in mind. It's very difficult to do a trade. I would never buy more than 1 Oneros at the time. Then we get the Purifier. We get that same little bounce as well. Look at that. Going back down to less than 25 million. 25 million for the sellers. 22.7 million for the buyers. That is still very cheap, honestly. It may not be the very bottom, or a second bottom might just be in the works. Keep that in mind here for Plex. Clearly have a double formation, and the second one was even lower. If something like that is happening in the stealth bombers, this would be the exact pattern, right? Get a bit of a recovery, but nothing major, and the buyers are just a couple 100,000 ISK below, above the bottom price. So it could still happen, honestly. We could still go lower. I could still end up having made a bad purchase at 22 million and go even lower. But we'll see how it works out, of course. It always remains a bit of gambling. Saber here, average price is continuing to go down. Buyers are at 58 below 60 million, 58.5. Sellers go down to 64 million. Yeah, it's just basically too much supply. Nobody is that interested in the Saber, it seems. Then we've got the Scimitar, also obviously below 200 million ISK here. 200 for the sellers, 185 for the buyers. If you grab a Scimitar for 190, which I think with an aggressive buyer you can do, you're buying below the chart, makes sense. So it's again just like last week. Potentially, if you want to invest in Tech 2 ships, I would say logistics cruisers make a lot of sense. Stealth bombers are still definitely okay, but on some of these, you've got this hesitation, this slight downtrend here again. We could go even lower if there is a second dip, and yeah, there is no real sign that a lot of this is going to change. The Stiletto back up to 30 million ISK here for the sellers, 25.5 for the buyers. I think the interceptors are basically recovering a little bit on the announced combat interceptor change. Basically a bit of hype that is driving these back up. Next up, the Tech 3 ship market coming in at 42.30. Like that. And last week, just like the week before, oversupply seemed like it could be a problem, and ooh, that is not good news if you were hoping that that would not continue. Here is the Confessor, average price down to 35 million ISK. 36 for the sellers, 32.5 for the buyers. Last 24 hours, not that much, just 2 sell orders, but 77 and 65, that's too much. Normally we would not have seen this happen on these low prices for the Confessors, so it's not dramatic. We're not seeing 400-500 extra Confessors coming in despite these low prices, but an average price of 40 million was easily defended on the sell side of things for most of the year here, and now this drop off is obviously happening on just a couple hundred extra Confessors, and there's still more coming in. So If these buyers go low enough, then I think an investment will start to look pretty juicy. Let's see if it's across the board, of course. Next up here we get the Hecate. Continued pressure going below 40 million ISK. It's not that bad yet, but it is still obviously again more than a month now of downtrend for the price. 40 million for the sellers, 36.5 million for the buyers, and here's the bad news: 79, 141, 85, almost a full page in the last 24 hours. This is way more than the market can handle. This is going to continue to drive the Hecate price down. Same with the buy prices. Oversupply, in my opinion, unfortunately, is starting to be confirmed here. Next up, we've got the Jackdaw. Same slow downtrend away from 40 million ISK. We're talking 37.5 million for the sellers, 34.5 million now for the buyers. And here, last 24 hours, half a page, but with 40, 50, 58, 27, 39. Just a couple of months ago, we would have seen these in maybe the 20s, 10s and 20s, and then 1, 2, and 3s for most of these others. So this is definitely more supply still coming in for these tactical destroyers. They are driving the price back down. I would say we do want to keep a close eye on that, because like the Confessor, for instance, already we see buyers at 32.5 million. You can see the peaks 40-45 million, definitely possible. That already starts to look like a nice percentage, and the fact that all of these now so far have that pressure, less than 35 million for a Jackdaw, where do the peaks go? 50 million ISK. So there is potential there. Timing the market is gonna be the name of the game, I think. Zwepel, big leg down, now trading well below 35 million ISK here. 34 million for the sellers, 31 million for the buyers. Look at the lack of buyers showing up here. New supplies, not that much, but of course we are talking super low prices, and still the last one is bringing 26 Zwepels and continuing to compete below the 34 million ISK mark. Very interesting. Zwepels buying for 31 million is definitely a 1-year low point at this time. Starts to look interesting, but this is only like the third week where we're really starting to see that oversupply show up in the market. And if this continues, then we could go a lot lower as well. Definitely want to keep an eye out for, because this is really interesting, and this could be a huge opportunity. For instance, if something big breaks out in Nullsec, we know that Confessors, Hecates and Jackdaws are very popular ships to use there in Nullsec brawls, because of their, I think, mobility, flexibility and all of that good stuff. So this could be huge when it comes to investment opportunities. Next up, we've got the cruisers. Here is the Legion continuing to drop to 1-year low points. 135 million for the sellers, 125 million for the buyers of a Legion. Well, you know, like half a year ago, this was unthinkable. 180, 200 million for the sellers of Legions was pretty damn normal. This is very cheap. Last 24 hours, not that much. Supply wise, this doesn't feel out of line. But yeah, this is nice opportunity, I think, as well. If you want to, if you grab a Legion for less than 130, have enough patience. Legions also definitely part of the Nullsec doctrines that are often flown. And now I do need to drink because my throat is completely dry. I can usually manage the whole EVE talk without any of that, but no, not this time. Alright, so the Legion, 1-year low point. The Loki, 1-year low point as well. Look at that. 137.5 million for a Loki, just right off the market. 125.5 for the buyers. New supplies, well, every day more come in here. We still have a 24 here despite these low prices. For the long term, I would say we could already start to try and grab a couple of these Tech 3 cruiser hulls, because this is very, very cheap considering the entire 1-year chart. If anyone has any information on what might be happening in Tech 3 market, I would love to read up about that, because of course I don't really know about wormhole space at this point. But this to me does start to feel like an opportunity. Next up here we get the Proteus, also diving back to the 130, 1-year low point range, yeah, 126.5, 117.5 for the buyers. Look at the lack of buyers. This is crazy. This is probably a buy opportunity. And then finally we get the Tengu, That's continuing to languish around the 140 million mark, 139 now for the sellers, 132 for the buyers. Bit less margin here, I think, because it is one of the better PvE hulls as well. Missile shields, always super popular, of course. So the thing are doing a little bit better than the others, but also trading at a 1-year low point. Yeah, my reading personally of the Tech 3 ship market is that we should start to make some moves on the cruisers, because this is very low, especially like the Loki and the Legion. In my opinion, the upwards potential is huge there, although it is a bit of a gamble, granted. I think I would go there first and wait a little bit longer for the destroyers, which are starting to show signs of that oversupply as well. I think that later down the line, if this trend continues, then these destroyers will become very interesting, especially if there is a possibility as well that it becomes so bad that we actually bottom out in the cruisers. Well, where is that supply going to go? If they have slots left and things like that, it might just mean even more destroyers as well. So this is a very dangerous situation for the Tech 3 market. There's definitely no more balance in the destroyer market and in the cruiser market here. There's just not enough demand or too much supply, or the prices are crashing down, which could be a huge opportunity. And then we still have the extra products left, which is gonna come in at 50 minutes. I can take my time. 50 minutes, and well, I decided on the faction battlecruisers here, a small segment, but basically with only Navy faction to go about. But this could again gives a nice indication on what might be happening in the loyalty point stores for faction warfare. So here is the Brudix Navy issue. That one is going down in price since a half year, but still trading at around 180 million ISK, 179 for the sellers, 157 for the buyers. The bottom is around the 130 range. The height is at around the 200 to 230 range. So this is still above average, but on the downtrend, which would indicate that Gallente LP is becoming less expensive, so Gallente might be winning out. So we would expect the Drake Navy issue to be coming up from a bottom, and look at that, right at the tail end, it's happening indeed. That is very interesting. 119 now for the sellers, still 103 for the buyers. That is interesting. Look at that little trend break. Look at the Brudix Navy issue here going back down. This for me means if you want to invest, if you want to ride a potential wave of faction warfare, which is like this right here, then this is the time to still try and grab like a Drake Navy issue below 110 million ISK. Your upside potential 200 million. Excuse me, still pretty much a doubling of the price, and it looks like we might just be right at the start of one of these waves. I myself have a Drake Navy issue. Actually, part of the reason why I'm checking these is because I like these Navy faction battle cruisers as a niche activity. They are great at hunting down the Triglavian scouts in the high-sec systems. So I really like him for that. And the Drake Navy issue, for instance, is my favorite scout hunter. So I've got one. If that one goes up to 200 million though, that would have been an accidental great investment. Next up, we've got Amar. Here is the Harbinger Navy issue. Same thing, right? Bottomed out at around 100 million ISK. It's now going for 133. Buyers are at 115. So obviously, we've got a bit of a trend break, which should mean that in the Hurricane Fleet issue, we have a top price at 160. Sell, sell, sell. We're down to 157.5, 142 for the buyers, and you can see that the trend break is here as well. And this is actually a pretty recent wave up for the Hurricane Fleet issue from 130 to 160 million. This is very interesting. This slide, is this the start of a tsunami to this range? Is this the start of a downtrend to this range? Same here, right? We get again a swelling up of the price, and then we get a slight dig down here on the Hurricane Fleet issue. Very interesting. This could be the right time to sell Hurricane and Brudix. Do I have a Hurricane Fleet issue hanging around somewhere? Maybe I do. I should definitely do a search for that. This might be the time to sell those two ships and to start investing in the much cheaper Caldari and Amar LP, basically, by going for some of these ships. Interesting. it's something that I've said many times, but at the moment, yeah, super busy at work. This trade aspect of the EVE Online sandbox is very, very interesting, full of potential, because of course you have actually a gameplay aspect that is tied to this seasonal change, this wavy behavior, which you can see right here, and right here on these ships, which is, it's basically tied to what the players do. It is like the perfect example of something that you could take part in, keep an eye on, and make lots of ISK from predictable trades. And I want to make this like a more regular part of what I check, but you know, we're almost at an hour again, and I'm not sure if I want to extend EVE Talk itself even more. Perhaps like something extra on top of that for these faction ships could be something, a route that I go for, but then yeah, time might just be the issue. I'm gonna continue to mull over these plans, but that's going to be it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.